The second I stepped into the secluded room at the back of the restaurant, something felt off. This wasn't the casual family brunch my mom had promised. The lights were too harsh, the table unnervingly pristine, and a neat stack of papers with a pen waiting for me sat in the center. My throat tightened when I noticed a sharply dressed man already at the table, laptop open, staring at me like I was the problem. My mom smiled as if this was ordinary, saying we just needed to figure out what was fair after my dad passed. I'm Sarah, 28, working remotely in tech, and I know enough about contracts and online banking to sense a setup. But nothing prepared me for the revelation. The man in the suit was her lawyer, and the documents in front of me were designed to divvy up my inheritance for everyone but me. He slid the papers toward me, my mom's hands folded like she was passing judgment, and everyone else at the table watched as if I had already committed some crime. The proposal was simple: sign and give away most of what my dad left me, for the good of the family. When I refused, the room shifted. Smiles vanished, and subtle threats replaced them: court battles, ruined credit, complications meant to intimidate me. My heart raced, but I felt my dad's voice echoing in my mind, reminding me that the law was on my side. I scanned the room, counting quietly at first, then louder: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Their confusion was palpable, and for the first time that day, I smiled. "Funny," I said. "I only brought one person too." I wasn't always the one sitting calmly across from a lawyer, calculating moves like a chess player. I was once just a teenager in a quiet San Diego suburb, believing family meant shared game nights, Costco runs, and my dad's corny JavaScript jokes. My dad, Richard, worked at a small tech firm, drove an old Honda, and packed his own lunch every day. My mom, Laura, hated that simplicity. She wanted the big house, the flashy car, and vacations that could fill her Instagram with envy-inducing photos. The tension between them finally exploded when I was 15. I remember the kitchen table that night clearly, my dad with stacks of printed statements, my mom with a Pinterest board of dream vacations open on her tablet. She complained about just getting by, while he admitted he was exhausted from pretending they could afford a life they couldn't. California's community property laws meant their assets would be split, and my mom saw a chance to chase the lifestyle she wanted. My dad saw losing half of what he had earned and still being responsible for alimony and child support. After the divorce, I stayed with my dad in his modest condo near Carlsbad. It wasn't glamorous, but the sound of the ocean at night was enough. On Fridays, we'd order DoorDash tacos and binge Netflix, and he taught me the lessons he thought would matter: budgeting apps, 401ks, credit scores, while other parents boasted about cars and vacations. Meanwhile, my mom moved up the coast, marrying Victor, a suave real estate agent, and seemingly reinvented herself overnight. Her social media overflowed with backyard barbecues, wine tastings, and matching outfits for her new kids, Mia and Ethan. I was still her daughter in name, but most days felt like I was just visiting the life she was building. Scrolling past her posts was a mix of nostalgia and alienation. So proud of my amazing family. Blessed living my best life. My name never appeared, except in complaints to my dad about money. Yet my dad, ever steady, would shrug off the frustration, turning to movies and popcorn as if to remind me life could still feel ordinary. Weekends were ours, hiking the canyons, driving up the coast, learning that no matter how beautiful a house on the cliff looked, it didn't fix the problems inside. My dad always kept our life simple, but it felt real. At night, when I worried I might somehow be the reason everything fell apart, he would sit at the edge of my bed and say, "You don't owe anyone your future just because they share your last name. Build something that's yours." Back then, it sounded like one of those dramatic movie lines. I had no idea he was quietly meeting with a lawyer, updating his documents, and making sure I wouldn't be at my mother's mercy if anything ever happened. I thought the hardest part of my life was behind me after the divorce and the family moved on, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Years later, one late-night drive down the I-5 would take him from this world and turn all those quiet lessons about money into a full-blown battle over my inheritance. My dad was the type to double-check seatbelts and reroute around traffic for safety. I never imagined a car accident could take him, yet that's exactly how it ended. It was a rainy Tuesday. He was driving home after finishing a late release at the office when a drowsy driver swerved across lanes. The collision set off a chain reaction, and by the time the highway patrol called me, he was already gone. The world went silent in a way that only happens when someone rips the floor out from under your life. The funeral was small and understated, just like he would have wanted, a few coworkers, neighbors, and me trying to breathe around the heavy weight in my chest. Then my mom arrived. She was dressed in black like a movie widow, Victor at her side, and Mia and Ethan trailing behind like props. She cried loudly, hugging people she barely knew, making sure everyone could hear just how devastated she was. I stood beside his casket, thinking, you didn't love him. You loved what he couldn't give you. After the service, while guests trickled out, a woman in a navy blazer approached me. She introduced herself as Elena, my dad's attorney. We sat at a metal picnic table outside, the air thick with the scent of flowers and fresh coffee. She explained that my dad had been meticulous, updating his will multiple times after the divorce because he knew my mother would come for his money the second he was gone. According to the documents, everything that was unquestionably his, plus the assets he had built since, came to me, the condo in Carlsbad, tech stocks, Apple shares, index funds, and his retirement accounts. Not a fortune, but enough to reflect the careful planning of a man who spent his life responsibly. I should have felt guilty that it all went to me, but instead I felt a quiet pride, like he had protected me even from beyond the grave. Elena walked me through the probate process, explaining how the court would oversee the transfer, leaving little room for anyone to challenge it. Your father was very clear, she said. He wanted you to control your future without interference. That word, interference, hung in the air like a storm cloud. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Not a, how are you holding up, but a paragraph about numbers, percentages, and splitting assets. She didn't ask how I was. She asked when we could discuss the estate. I answered politely, mentioned probate, and reminded her dad had an attorney. She ignored it and demanded rough estimates, as if she were pricing a property. When I hesitated, the guilt trips began. She reminded me of all she'd done when I was a child, the cost of my teenage years, how Mia and Ethan needed college funds. Always the same refrain, think of the family. But what she meant was her new family. I forwarded everything to Elena, who advised me not to share balances, not to sign anything, and not to engage in private negotiations. She said my mom could hire a lawyer, but the documents were solid. Her tone shifted quickly from manipulation to veiled threats, voicemails about expensive lawyers, drawn-out legal battles, and subtle digs at my credit. Mixed in, a feigned concern, I'm just looking out for you. You don't want this to get ugly, do you? Like a Hallmark card disguised as a sales pitch. I stopped responding and logged every call, every text, every tactic. My dad had taught me that the reckless leave a trail. Weeks later, probate confirmed everything. The condo, the accounts, the stocks, all moved into my name. Elena sent me legal copies and clear next steps. Within 24 hours, my mom emailed, suggesting a family meeting at a quiet restaurant in Irvine. Small group. Open discussion. Just us. My stomach twisted. Dad had done everything right. Yet, somehow, I still felt like prey. I called Elena. Will you come with me? I asked. Her answer was instant, yes. She would be there. I wasn't walking into any trap alone. The day arrived, folder packed with copies of the will, probate confirmation, and a log of every guilt-laden message. My little shield against years of being made to feel ungrateful. The restaurant was quiet, awkwardly so, with soft background music and glasses that never seemed empty. A hostess led me past couples and business lunches to the private room I had already imagined. My mom sat at the head of the table, posture perfect in black, Victor to her right, a blazer too tight for comfort. Mia and Ethan were nearby. Across the table, the man in the gray suit waited, laptop open. No menus. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee, with a glass of water, a neat stack of papers, and a pen placed perfectly in front of me. Sarah, you made it, my mom said, smiling like I had just arrived to help set up for brunch. We just need to talk. The man in the suit stood and offered his hand. I'm Daniel, he said, introducing himself as my dad's attorney, here to help the family explore options regarding his estate. The way he said family made it sound like we had all suffered equally, like grief could be split neatly. I sank into the chair, eyeing the papers before me. The top page had my name on it, filled with dense legal language I didn't even want to read: redistribution, voluntary agreement, irrevocable. Before I could panic, my mom leaned forward, wearing her practiced look of sympathy. We just want to make sure everyone is provided for, she said. Your father's will didn't consider the current reality of the family. Life is expensive. College is expensive. This is about fairness. She gestured toward Mia and Ethan, as if they were items on a budget sheet. Daniel took over, explaining the family settlement agreement in a calm, professional tone. According to the numbers, reasonable meant about 65% of what I had inherited. Reasonable, apparently, to take from me for the good of the family. I stayed composed on the outside, but heat was rising inside. My dad had sacrificed and worked tirelessly, yet I was being told that honoring his choices was somehow selfish. No one is trying to take anything from you, my mom added, a faint smile that barely hid the irony. We just want to avoid a long, ugly legal fight. This way, we handle it privately, like adults. I thought about her voicemails, her texts dripping with guilt, all demanding I be fair. I remembered my dad, sitting at the edge of my bed, reminding me I didn't owe anyone my future. I inhaled slowly. If I don't sign, what happens? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. The room froze. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Mia stared at the table. Ethan kept scrolling on his phone, avoiding eye contact. Daniel folded his hands, giving me a look that was supposed to seem kind. Then this could become complicated, he said. Your mother could contest parts of the probate. Delays, legal fees, public records. It could impact your credit or your ability to access the assets quickly. We're trying to prevent conflict. My mom leaned forward, her voice tightening just enough to slip the mask. We're giving you a chance to show you care about this family, Sarah. You're not the only one who lost something. Mia is applying to college, Ethan has his future ahead of him. We're asking you to do the right thing. I scanned the table, the lawyer ready to bill by the hour, Victor married into my mom's obsession with status, 2 teenagers raised in a world where I barely existed, and my mom, crying on cue while sliding a pen toward me. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice was steady. How many of you are there again? I asked, softly at first. My mom frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I let my eyes drift around the table, counting slowly. 1. Imam. 2. Victor. 3. 4 for Mia and Ethan, then I paused at Daniel. 5. You are a lot of people, I said finally, locking eyes with my mom. Confusion crossed her face, then irritation. Sarah, this isn't a joke. I smiled. For the first time all day, I felt ready. You're right, I said. It's not. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, typing a single word I had prepared before arriving. I set it face down next to the untouched pen. A sharp, precise knock came at the door seconds later. The hostess opened it just wide enough for a woman in a navy blazer to step through, calm and professional, folder in hand. Hi, Laura, Elena said politely. I hear we're discussing Sarah's inheritance. After that meeting, my mom stopped pretending to be heartbroken and started acting like someone who had just lost a high-stakes auction. She walked out stiff and silent, Victor at her elbow, her lawyer muttering about revisiting options. Elena and I stayed behind just long enough for my hands to stop shaking. She told me I had handled it perfectly, that legally I was untouchable, and if my mom tried anything else, we were ready. For 3 days, my phone remained quiet. No guilt trips, no long voicemails. I almost convinced myself that having a real attorney present had scared her into submission. But then the messages resumed, colder this time. Long paragraphs about disappointment, how ashamed my dad would be, how money had changed me. Subtle hints that if I didn't comply, my financial life could become complicated. I forwarded everything to Elena. Her advice made my stomach turn. If she can't move you emotionally, she might try to move you financially, she said. That night, I barricaded myself in the adult version of a childhood bedroom, laptop open, accounts reviewed, passwords changed, two-factor authentication enabled, credit frozen. Every app secured, every question reset. My dad had always said, "Your data is worth more than the cash in your wallet." For the first time, I felt the full weight of that wisdom. A few days later, a suspicious email arrived, identical to the bank's usual template. Important action required. My gut tightened. I hovered over the link, noticing the subtle deviation in the URL. Someone had paid attention. I called the bank directly using the number on the back of my card, heart pounding, ready for whatever game my mother thought she could play next. Elena didn't let that version of events sit in the air for more than a breath. When it was her turn, she stood calmly, adjusted her blazer, and spoke like someone explaining gravity to people who insisted on floating. She reminded the court that there had never been a joint account. That the credentials used in the failed attempts matched none of my mother's legal access. That the phishing email had been sent to my personal address, not a shared family one. She pointed out that checking paperwork does not require sitting in a car with a laptop outside someone else's home while another person positions herself at the mailbox. And finally, she reminded the judge that intent is often proven not by what people say, but by what they coordinate. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She asked the judge to allow me to speak. My throat tightened as I stood. The room felt smaller, like all the oxygen had decided to leave at once. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, sharp and cold, not sad, not apologetic. Calculating. That look alone told me everything I needed to know. "I didn't come here because I wanted to punish anyone," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I came here because I was scared. Not of losing money. Of losing control over my own life." I explained the meeting at the restaurant. The papers. The pressure disguised as concern. How the word fair had been used like a weapon instead of a value. I talked about changing passwords at midnight, about freezing my credit, about watching my phone light up with a security alert while my mother stood outside my building. "I loved my dad," I said. "He made his choices very carefully. He trusted that what he left me would be used to build a future, not to be negotiated away behind closed doors. When someone tries to take that by pretending to be me, that stops being family conflict. That becomes theft." My mother shook her head slowly, like she was disappointed in a stranger who had failed a test. Victor stared straight ahead. No one interrupted me. When I sat down, my hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter than it had in months. The judge recessed for a short time. Those 15 minutes felt longer than the weeks of waiting that had led up to this day. When he returned, his expression was neutral, but his words were not gentle. He ruled that there was sufficient evidence to support attempted identity theft and coordinated fraudulent activity. He issued a restraining order prohibiting my mother and Victor from contacting me directly or indirectly, from accessing my mail, and from approaching my residence or place of work. The case would proceed further, with potential criminal consequences, pending additional review. He looked directly at my mother when he said, "Family relationships do not grant permission to violate the law." Her face didn't crumple. She didn't cry. She simply went still, like someone realizing the board they'd been playing on had flipped over. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Sharper. Elena walked beside me, already talking about next steps, about civil protections, about making sure every account remained locked tight. I listened, nodded, but part of me was still inside that courtroom, watching the story finally leave my hands and become something official, something recorded. My phone buzzed later that night with a message from an unknown number. One sentence. "You didn't have to do this." I forwarded it to Elena and blocked the number without replying. Weeks passed. Then months. The noise faded. The fear softened into something manageable. I stopped jumping every time my phone vibrated. The cameras stayed up, but they became background objects instead of lifelines. My inheritance remained untouched, not because I was afraid to use it, but because for the first time, I was choosing when and how. I started therapy. I traveled. I put a down payment on a small place that felt like mine in a way nothing ever had before. Sometimes I still thought about my mother, about the version of her that used to braid my hair and pack my lunches. But I stopped confusing that memory with the woman who had stood at my mailbox trying to become me. What I learned through all of it was this: boundaries don't always look polite. Sometimes they look like police reports, frozen credit, and court exhibits. Sometimes protecting yourself means letting other people face consequences they worked very hard to earn. My dad used to tell me that inheritance isn't just money. It's permission. Permission to live without apologizing for surviving. And for the first time, I finally understood what he meant. I just sat there and listened, knowing what was coming next. Elena stood, calm and precise, and laid out the facts. The will had been fully probated, my father's accounts were in his name, then mine, no joint access, no gray area. She displayed the emails, the fake bank link, the IC3 complaint, the messages where my mom hinted that accounts and paperwork could get complicated if I didn't cooperate. She even played a voicemail where my mother's voice betrayed the threat beneath the sugar-coated tone. By the time I took the stand, the story was already clear. My job wasn't to perform, it was to tell the truth, steady and factual, like my dad would have presented a bug report. I recounted the restaurant meeting, the settlement agreement they'd tried to force on me, the pressure, the threats, and the phishing emails that appeared after I refused. I explained how I had changed passwords, frozen my credit, spoken to the bank about failed login attempts, and watched the ring footage in real time, seeing every piece click together. The prosecutor asked how it felt to realize my own mother was behind it. My throat tightened, but I spoke honestly. It felt like watching someone reach into my chest and try to take the last piece of my dad I had left, I said. When everything was submitted and the judge had reviewed the evidence, the verdict was delivered. My mother and Victor were found guilty of attempted identity theft and fraud. There was no dramatic TV show prison sentence, real life doesn't work that way, but the consequences were heavier than any public humiliation could have been. Tens of thousands in fines, restitution for my legal costs, probation monitoring every financial move for years, mandatory financial crimes education, and a restraining order keeping them 5 years away from me, my home, and anything tied to my name. Victor's real estate license was referred to the board for review, his ability to fund the lifestyle my mom had curated online vanished in an instant. What surprised me most wasn't the law, it was the silence afterward. No dramatic screaming, no chasing me down. My mother just stared at the floor, her carefully built life crumbling in ways a filter or caption couldn't fix. I walked past her without a word. The judgment had already said it all. For the first time since my dad died, the ground beneath me felt like it belonged to me again, not to my mother's version of family, not to her hunger for fairness, but to the girl my dad had raised to understand that real value is something you protect, even when the person trying to take it shares your last name. In the weeks that followed, life didn't transform into some glossy after picture. But for the first time, the silence in my condo felt like peace instead of anxiety. I woke up without panicking over notifications or unexpected voicemails. My accounts remained secure. My doorbell camera only showed Amazon deliveries and my neighbor walking his dog. Normalcy felt strange and wonderful. With the legal battle behind me, Elena helped me go through my dad's estate not as a map of targets, but as tools for a real future. Tech stocks were shifted into broad index funds, an emergency fund was established, and a retirement plan was put in place that would have made him proud. Instead of guilt when checking my accounts, I felt capable. I was not just holding on to what he left me, I was growing it. I stayed in tech, remote from the same condo, sometimes sitting at the small dining table with coffee, looking at the empty chair where he once sat, feeling the sting of loss in a clean, healed way. Therapy helped with the rest. I worked through boundaries, grief, and family trauma with a counselor who didn't flinch when I said aloud, "My mom tried to steal my inheritance." Slowly, the knot in my chest loosened. I realized I had spent years trying to earn a place in a family that never really included me, and that fantasy no longer controlled me. I started showing up in different spaces, a local yoga studio where no one knew my last name, community meetups for women in tech, online communities that actually helped. I turned part of my inheritance into a donation for victims of identity theft. I didn't post it online, I kept it in a folder labeled, "Dad would like this." As for my mother, the consequences spoke louder than any lecture ever could. The house she flaunted online was sold. Victor's license problems curtailed his deals and income. Their online lives shifted from bragging to vague quotes about starting over. None of it touched me. Mia and Ethan stayed away, and I didn't reach out. Their understanding, if it ever comes, will be theirs alone. People sometimes say, "But she's still your mother." Shared DNA does not give anyone the right to your future. Love is proven by protection, not by shouting family when money is involved. My dad's real inheritance wasn't the condo, the accounts, or the stocks. It was the spreadsheet he taught me to read, the credit score he told me to guard, the lesson that integrity matters even when no one is watching. It was the courage to walk into a room full of people who wanted everything and say, "No." If you're sitting there, watching someone twist your loyalty into leverage, hear this clearly: you are not selfish for protecting what's yours. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not a bad daughter or son for refusing to be manipulated by someone who shares your last name. The moment my mother tricked me into a family meeting, she thought she could threaten me into handing over my inheritance. What she didn't count on was that my dad had already given me something far more valuable, the knowledge that real family protects your future, they don't try to steal it.